Good evening, the erudite speaker for the day, uh, Bharat Agarwal ji, and my regional council colleague, Geeta ji, and all the delegates who have been participating in this excellent webinar. I address this as an excellent webinar for the simple reason that we have been seeing this automation taking over our traditional practice areas. So this what's called digital disruption should not be able to overtake or what's called hinder our progress, especially the chartered accountants. We are always equipped to overcome the challenges and convert them into opportunities and take our profession forward and build the nation. Being partners in nation building, I am very proud to have a great speaker today, a chartered accountant and also an advocate. So this topic for the day, how to read and analyze the court orders in respect of income tax and GST, becomes very, very vital in the present context, simply because of late you have been seeing after the faceless assessment from August 13, 2020, so many funny, surprising and shocking orders are being passed, and being unable to meet the officials face to face, the explanation will not be so easy. So first of all, it is very challenging to tackle a particular case only through written communication without oral communication, number one. Number two, they are also not able to understand what all documents they are presenting to them, and also passing many shocking orders, and litigation has become a wider what is called it has become inevitable. I don't want to say it as an opportunity. Because of the system, it is a challenge for all of us to protect ourselves and our clientele unnecessarily from being taxed for no mistake of theirs and misunderstanding of the facts and law by the officials who are passing the orders. In such cases, it is inevitable for us to file an appeal, and being aggrieved by the orders and the consequences, we are forced to take up the things in a next stage, that is appeal stage. Maybe it is at appellate at the commissioner level or tribunal or to the court levels. So under these circumstances, to avoid all these things, at the time of presentation of our papers itself, if at all we are well versed with these taxation laws, in addition to uh, giving the facts about the case, we can also take the shelter of the precedents that are already there, and our pronouncement are already there in various case laws across the country at various stages, so that that will come to our what's called protection, and also makes the officer passing the orders a bit alert. Definitely they cannot ignore any any verdict of a court, and they are bound to follow those pronouncements of the courts if at all they are falling under that jurisdiction. So under these circumstances, it is a very challenging time for us in this faceless environment. It is not only in income tax, we have been seeing even in GST, high-pitched assessments are done without even seeing the papers, without giving the opportunity of being heard, and which is the constitutional right of every citizen. So whenever this transition takes place in any procedural or systems, such things will happen. Even though if it settles down, definitely the interpretation of law by the officials is not going to be easy, because they always think that high-pitched assessments will definitely be good for them and for the revenue. But at the same time, the rights of the genuine taxpayers and law-abiding citizens cannot be taken away. Under these circumstances, the chartered accountants, with the help of the advocates, we should have to intervene and try to prevent such orders. So in the To preventing or prevention is always better than cure. So prevention is the process that is very badly required in these circumstances, for which today's program definitely helps. Because if we know how to read and how to understand a particular case law, definitely we'll be able to use the gist of it while making our representations before the authorities, assessing authorities, so that the future bad consequences of appeal and all these things may be avoided at that stage. And in this endeavor, we at SIRC we have been taking under the leadership of our chairman, Mr. Jalpati, that we have to enter into the newer areas or the existing areas with a more in-depth knowledge, so that we upskill ourselves and our quality of professionalism is increased, so that the complications are reduced and the compliances also are made easy. So in these respects, even the routine topics like TDS also we have been taking, and the new areas like understanding these case laws also we are taking, and the new areas of practice also we are taking. We are trying to enlighten the members in these fields. For every program of ours, almost 5 to 6 days in a week, we have been conducting the programs. But the members have been supporting with a very good attendance. Every time above 500 people are attending, that shows. Many are complaining that why you are conducting so many programs, but being different, being the programs of different types, different opportunities, we are seeing so much of attendance, only to see that every CA should specialize in one or two areas. So that will help them to combine together, and that the networking facility that is provided and multidisciplinary partnership that is being provided by the ICAI recently should help the members to come together. Those who are specialized in one or two fields can come together, network themselves, or come together in a multidisciplinary partnership way also, or even corporatize their practices to see that the quality of their professional works are improved. And these upskilling activities are consistently done by SIRC, and we are thankful to each one of you for supporting this by participating. And this pandemic time, we have made use of in a very befitting manner, getting Agarwal ji from Mumbai is not an easy thing, if at all he is to be called physically to Chennai. So, but because of this, thanks to pandemic and thanks to the technology, we are able to get him online, and world is flat. We are seeing he is sitting at Mumbai. I am sitting on behalf of SIRC at a small town like Bellary, being secretary of SIRC, and Madam Geeta is sitting at Bangalore, and members across South and also across the country are participating here. That is the strength of technology. So when the disruption is happening, we should take advantage of these disruptions, update ourselves, update the technology also, and move forward. And that is the strength of chartered accountancy. No profession definitely would be able to match CA profession in terms of converting the challenges into opportunities. So with these words, I very warmly welcome Agarwal ji for this program of SIRC. Very happy that thank you for accepting our invitation and being here, sir. I also welcome Geeta ji for this program to introduce the speaker, and I also very warmly welcome each one of you delegates who are the reason for, you are the reason for making this program happen. We are also very keen to listen to the speaker, because this is one new area. Even Geeta madam was telling in some other meeting now that she is also keen to sit through the session. So with these words, very warm welcome to each one of you, and wish you all a happy learning. Before the speaker takes over, I request Geeta madam to introduce the erudite speaker for the benefit of the audience. Thank you. Over to Geeta madam.
Thank you, Panaras sir. I'm audible, no, Selva?
Yeah.
Selva, I'm audible. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Chairman of SIRC CA Jalpati in his absentia because he couldn't attend because of the network issues in his place where he is staying right now. And the Secretary CA Panaraj, and today's eminent speaker CA Bharat Agarwal, and my dear virtual viewers, happy evening to one and all. It's my proud privilege to introduce today's eminent speaker, Bharat Agarwal sir. He qualified as a CA in 1997, winner of Kinloch Forbes Gold Medal in Law from Mumbai University in 2010. Practiced as a CA for more than a decade, handling tax disputes and tax planning. Acquired Senate from Bar Council of India in the year 2010 after completing law. Launched law firm is legal in 2012, which specializes in real estate deal structuring for real estate developers with focus on tax planning. The firm also handles tax litigation in various forums, including Mumbai High Court and Supreme Court. And Bharat Agarwal has structured some large deals and documentation using his expertise as a CA and lawyer. He leads a team of professionals, which includes CAs and lawyers, and he has authored 2 books, one on prevention of Money Laundering Act and the other on Service Tax. So he's ably assisted by his wife, Advocate Ritika Agarwal, who too is also a CA and lawyer and is a partner of Ace Legal Heads, the litigation site. Bharat Agarwal has more than 23 years of experience in handling real estate laws and has been advising BANM, Credoy, MCHI, and DUs, and he is also empaneled by LIC HFL AMC for advising on funding of real estate deals. He has been speaking in a number of forums on various topics of law and taxation. He has a long list of articles published in various tax magazines and tax portals covering a gamut of issues. So with this introduction, we once again wholeheartedly welcome you to this session, sir.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. This is my first appearance in the southern part of the country. I'm so glad that this technology is making me travel without really moving from my chair. And it is so nice to, really experience. I've always been to South on tourism. This is the first time when I'm here for delivering a lecture on a topic which is extremely close to my heart. I believe that the technology is in place right now for this seminar, and you can all hear me, see me. And if there is any issue, please do let me know. If I'm going too fast, if I'm going too slow, please let me know, because I need to adapt to the audience, need of the audience. Coming to the topic, this is a topic which unfortunately nobody teaches us in the law schools as well. Studying of case laws, how to read a case law is a very interesting topic, and we see so many times that some judgments are wrongly quoted and cited at the bar, in the submissions to the CIT appeals, to the tribunal. In fact, lot of knowledge is being spread through the WhatsApp university. Unfortunately, most of that is wrongly interpreted. The judgments, we read 2 lines of a judgment, we feel that's the law, and it's totally based on its own facts, and we are very happy, okay, oh, this judgment came, now my case is covered matter, it is strong, I'll cite this. You take out that WhatsApp, and your client sends it to you, or some other CA sends it to you, you feel, hi, it's a covered matter. And when you really go to the body of the judgment, or the judges go into it and they say, no, sorry, you're not covered by this, your facts are different. And that's the time when you realize, oh, I should have better, it would be better if I prepare this judgment and then appear, rather than appearing like this. So, before I start on this topic, I just wanted to discuss what are the advantages of reading a judgment in toto, like from the beginning till the end. Over the years, I have been addressing law students, CA students on this issue, and I've always told them that as a law practitioner, as a chartered accountant, our biggest tool is the words we use, both spoken and written words we use. And to have a really sharp professional vocabulary, the best we can do is read Economic Times for the chartered accountants on the finance side, and read court judgments if you are representing before various judicial authorities or quasi-judicial authorities. Because over the years, if you read the judgments from 1950s and 60s, the Supreme Court judgments, the judges used to write such beautiful English, and the way they used to express themselves on a very drab and a boring topic of law, they used to make it so interesting, and by giving comparisons and examples, that the concept of that particular provision or law was embedded in our minds. It was enshrined in our mind even today. And those judgments are even, the lighthouse for all the judgments which are passed today. If you see, they are still cited at the bar, they are still quoted in the judgments, and they are followed as precedents. So that's the quality of what a court judgment does. It lays down a law, it explains a law, it expounds the law, and it helps you to understand that the law is also much beyond the written section, and it is much vast than what we think. I would not make it more boring by making it this way. I'll put it as a presentation. I am being assisted by my colleague Sneha Sarbhushan, CA Sneha Sarbhushan, who has worked on this PPT. We will share this PPT at the end of the seminar, which can be circulated. And I think she has already mailed it, so that can be shared with the participants as per your convenience. And I just request Sneha to share the screen so that can be done. Okay, so till she's putting this, playing this, I just want to explain that this PPT, this presentation is divided into broadly two parts. One part is the theoretical or the academic part of it, where I will be taking you through the various parts of a judgment and explaining you the theory of it, or the use, the advantages, how to read it. And then in part B, I have prepared two case laws, real live case laws judgments, which I will, of income tax, which I will run through and show you in practical way how to read it, how to mark, how to make notes, so that although it's my own style and you can develop your own style, but it will give you some guidance and idea as to how you should be reading a judgment. Even long judgments can be read very quickly, and the ratios or the law laid down can be grasped very easily. So to start with part A, I will start with the theoretical part of it. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so I was mentioning about the WhatsApp University. Now, this is one of the WhatsApp which I received on my cell phone, whereby it reported, the WhatsApp reported that the Supreme Court has rejected the plea of tenants for a waiver of rent, meaning the payment of rent cannot be refused and it is mandatory for the tenant for any property they occupied. This was during the lockdown period, the first lockdown, and the rents were not being paid, or there were issues on rent. So this was the news which came in, that Supreme Court has passed an order that now rent cannot be waived, and it is mandatory for the tenants for any property they occupy. The order was passed on the plea of lawyers requesting to waive off the rent of their chambers during lockdown, which was rejected by the court and is applicable to all properties, whether residential, industrial, or commercial. Now, this is what was reported on WhatsApp as a judgment, that this is what the judgment has done. Now, what was the actual judgment? Let us just compare what the actual judgment was. Now, this was the actual decision. If you read what was the actual issue and the decision, it was totally different. It said, senior advocate Kailash was there for Supreme Court Bar Association contended, we are not saying that rent for lawyer chambers should not be charged. It should not be made a ground for eviction during lockdown. The court said, we are not going to enter into this issue. You are not entitled to any special consideration, the bench said. There was no mention of any residential, industrial, commercial property. There was no mention of that the lawyers are saying that they will not pay the rent and they were asking for waiver of rent. So what WhatsApp reported and what was the actual decision was poles apart. Now, this is what happens when we rely too much on WhatsApp for our legal knowledge. Instead of going to the source, we are more, looking for a quick fix and this is what that quick fix does. So this is just an example. Please, as a professional, let's rely on the source rather than on what is being reported in the media, newspapers, WhatsApp. Let's look at the real judgment. Next slide, Sneha. Okay, so what is the agenda? Today, what we'll do is we'll read what is a case law, anatomy of a case law. Now, like as a human body, we have parts, we have hands, legs. Same way, a judgment has various parts. How to identify those parts, analyze those parts, and understand what is the ratio laid down. We'll do that analysis, and in the end, I will take you through a couple of actual judgments to explain how a judgment is read. Next slide. So as I was explaining, now when we are reading law, any provision, the source of law is covered in the act, the rules, regulations. There are notifications and circulars, and then comes the judicial pronouncements or the judgments which are rendered by the High Court or Supreme Court and the various tribunals on various issues. A lot of law, I would say more than 50% of the law comes from the judicial pronouncements, because that is an analysis and that is the determination of the various facets of a particular provision, whether it is mandatory, whether it is directory. All those kind of things are determined by the courts through the judicial pronouncements. And that is where the judicial pronouncements take an important part, because it gives an insight into the particular provision which we are reading in a statute. So a statutory provision is what gives us the law, but what judgment gives us is a complete analysis of that particular law and all the facets of it. So that's why judicial pronouncement is a very important source of law. And mind you, that it should not be treated as the only source of law. Ultimately, the statutory provisions in its bare bones is the best place where you can get to know about a particular provision. So start from a bare provision, read it thoroughly, see what notifications, circulars have been issued by CBDT, and finally go to the judgments to understand how all these circulars and the provisions have been interpreted judicially by the court, how courts have been taking a view on those kind of provisions. Next slide. So what is a case law? Let us first understand what do we mean by a case law, or a judgment, or a decision, or a pronouncement. These are all various words used for a court speaking. What is it? It's a legal case that establishes a principle or a rule of law, and it can be based upon the statutory provisions or rules, or even an earlier judgment. It can be interpreting an earlier judgment of the court. It can differ with it. It can concur with it. All these are covered in a particular case law. This judgment or case law is used as a precedent while relying upon the arguments by the lawyers. The court relies on it while giving a verdict. The other judicial bodies rely upon it while framing resolution, passing circulars, passing notifications, and or even issuing internal guidelines and memos to the officers. Like today itself, there is a particular clarification. I will not call it a clarification. It's a direction issued by the ministry saying that wherever the reopening notices under section 148 have been challenged, and Bombay High Court, Delhi High Court, Calcutta High Court, a lot of high courts have stayed those, how to go about handling those kind of cases. So from these case laws are emerging certain decisions which the legislature or the executives are taking. So that's what a case law does. Next slide. Okay, so these are on your screen. What you see are the various parts of a particular judgment, and we will go on these one by one. We'll climb up to it and to get to know what the final decision is and why it is. So there is the facts of the case. Every case is based upon its own set of facts. You cannot compare apples and oranges. You cannot rely upon facts of one case to argue your case with a totally different facts. So facts of the case are very important. From the facts of the case emerges the issue or the question before the court. So what a court does is it culls out a question before it from whatever the issues have taken place, discussions have taken place at a lower authority before the lower authority, and makes an issue, and it's normally put in a question form. When we go ahead, we'll see that. We'll see it in an actual example also, which I'll be going through today. So you'll see that. So an issue is framed. Once the issue is framed, both the parties argue about it. So the revenue will say A, B, C, D. The the SSE will say no, it's not this, it's this. So they rely on judgments, they rely on statutory provisions, they will rely on certain facts. So there are facts which are relevant facts, there are facts which are irrelevant facts. All those things get covered in a judgment. Once all that thing happens, then the court speaks, and court speaks in two ways. One, it gives the decision. It tells you what it is holding. So it may say, okay, this section 68 cannot be applied. It is not an unexplained cash credit. Now that is a decision, that is a judgment. But that judgment is irrelevant. It is in subsilentio. It is not worth it if the reasoning is not there, because ultimately judges cannot be an autocratic body without giving reasons. They are just saying what it is and you have to obey to that. No, the people want to know the reason why they have decided what they have decided. So the why, quote unquote, why is the most important part of a judgment. That's the soul of the judgment. And this thing, I'll keep saying it during the entire presentation today, that the why of a judgment is the most important part. In any judgment you read the why, and that why should go in your subconscious, and you should know that, okay, because of so and so reason, legal reason, this judgment has come in, and that why becomes the precedence, and it is cited at the various places for better efficacy. So we'll spend a lot of time on the why part of it at a later part of it. Now, so whenever there is a case law which is picked up, so first of all, it has a title. By title, what we mean is there is a name of the court. It could be before the income tax tribunal, so and so. There will be a number to it, an appeal number, or a writ number, or whatever. So that number is there. And then there are parties to the list. List means dispute. So parties to the list are what? So there is an appellant, and there is a respondent or a there is a plaintiff, there is a defendant. So there are these parties to the dispute. In the case, so when you're reading a case, so there is a case number. As I said, that case number is a case number which is allotted by that particular court. It is not the citation of the case. It is a number which is given by the court for its own administrative reasons. So it may say ITA number so and so of 2021. Now that ITA number dash and dash of 2021 is not the citation. That is the number of the case before that court for their administrative reasons. When that case gets reported in a journal, in a legal journal, then it becomes a citation. That citation includes what all? I have given an example of Keshavnan Bharti versus State of Kerala. So AIR is the name of the journal, that is All India Reporter. 1973 is the year in which that case got reported. Mind you, it is not the year of the case when the judgment was delivered, but it is the date, the year in which that case was reported. So the judgment could have been delivered in December 1972, but it is reported in January 1973, so that's why it's 1973. Then there is a court, it's Supreme Court, High Court, Tribunal, whatever. So that court, SC, and 1461 is the page number of that particular judgment or that journal from which that judgment starts. So this is how you put it even in an ITR, that so and so ITR. First you give the year 2021 within bracket. So it says 473 ITR page 32 within bracket BOM. BOM means Bombay High Court. So that's how it's cited. And this is a citation which is used in the court of law before the CIT appeals, tribunals, before the AOs. I don't know how many people really cite a judgment before the AO, whether it is worth it also. That's a discussion for some other day. But whenever you are citing, please be sure that you are citing if it's a reported judgment, then you are reproducing the correct citation so that it can be easily searched. If that judgment is unreported, then you have to give the original ITA number or whatever that number the court has granted, and you have to attach the copy of the judgment. Because it is an unreported judgment, your opponent, or say the authority before whom you're citing, or with the judge before whom you're citing, he doesn't have the benefit of finding that judgment on its own because it's not reported. So it's your bounden duty to annex that or to submit it in the faceless environment, scan it and upload it. So that is what is necessary if it's an unreported judgment. And mind you, a lot of judgments, good judgments, go unreported, and there is no one mechanism to search these unreported judgments, but it does keep coming off and on. If you are closely associated with people on the legal side, then you keep receiving these unreported judgments. They lay down a good amount of law which gets unreported and can really help you a lot. So keep an eye on those unreported judgments as well. So now coming to the next part of it, when we were talking about the facts of the case, the first step which we saw in that slide where that man was climbing, so that's the first step. We said facts of the case. Now facts of the case are very, very relevant, and a change or a twist in one fact can change your entire judgment. The cases which we will discuss today practically in part B, I will explain you how a one twist of the fact can totally change that judgment and it cannot be cited. So you have to really be very careful when reading a judgment as to what were the actual facts. Now, when you're going to read a judgment, you will find it a little boring to go through the facts, because there will be a lot of irrelevant facts which are not really required to be read. But to have a proper English flow and to have completeness, the judges write that. The art in reading a judgment is how quickly you can see that, okay, this is not what I want to read, and you skip those. There could be paragraphs, there could be lines, there could be intermittent lines. The idea is you skip those irrelevant facts and go to the relevant fact, which is the backbone of the decision, or which are the backbone of the issues in dispute. That is very important. So a relevant fact affects a decision, an irrelevant fact does not affect the decision at all. So you have to try and understand what is relevant, what is not relevant, and then based upon those relevant facts, you can cite it as a precedence in your case and say, okay, these facts are also existing in my case, and therefore this is relevant, and the judgment here should apply to my case also. So that's very important to first determine as to what are the facts of the case, relevant or irrelevant. Now, the next point is what you have to look at in the facts are, within the facts also there are subparts. So say we have a palm, so palm could be facts, and the fingers what we have are the subparts of it or the sub facts of it. So what will the facts contain? Facts will contain who are the parties, who sued whom. So basically whether the department, the AO made an addition, the assessee won in the CIT appeal, so the department has come to the tribunal in appeal, or whether it's the other way around, that the assessee has lost its CIT appeal and has come to the tribunal. So who's the appellant, who's the respondent, all those kind of things, the parties you have to determine. That's an important part of it, but you can skip it quickly because at the beginning only you know that who's the appellant and who's the respondent when you're looking at the face of the judgment, because it says so and so versus so and so. So if it is CIT versus so and so, you know that the department is in appeal. But if it is Mr. so and so versus the CIT, then you know, okay, the assessee is in appeal. So you can very well look at it, find out from the face of the judgment itself. Then there is a history of the case in the facts, where the judges write, okay, that the AO made an addition, the assessee went into CIT appeal, the CIT appeal heard the matter and he decided so and so. So all those facts are noted in the body of the order. In case of an income tax case, they mention the notices that, okay, on so many days the notices were issued, 143(2) was issued on so and so date, it was received. So where the very validity of the notice is in challenge, or the service of notice itself is in challenge, there these facts become very, very relevant. I'm just trying to explain how relevant and irrelevant facts are noted. So where the assessee is challenging that the notice itself was not validly served, there the fact of notice having been issued, sent by post, not received, or received all those facts become relevant. But imagine a scenario where this is not in dispute at all about how the notice was issued on, and the dispute is more on the nature of addition, that section 68 could not have even applied, it is not unsecured loan or whatever. Then in that case, if you are spending time reading that notice was issued on so and so date, it was responded on so and so date, it was served in this manner, these are irrelevant facts, you have to skip them. So what the judgment which you are reading is based on what issue. When you know it in advance, you will be able to skip the irrelevant facts. So the same fact can become relevant if it's under challenge. The same fact will become irrelevant when there is no challenge to it. So the idea is how fast you can skip the irrelevant facts. Having discussed about the relevancy, irrelevancy, and the facts, the next thing is the issues. So from the facts emerge the issues. Now the issues are basically the problem areas between the two warring side or the two disputing side. To give a very crude and a simple example, I'll say we all have been judges in our lives at some point or the other. As parents, especially to younger kids, 10, 12 years, we all judge them on a daily basis. Either they'll be fighting, they'll come to you, they'll go to the dad and say, this is what has happened, he's beating me, he's taken my pen, he's done this. The other party, the other sibling will say something else. You will say, sorry, I'm in a webinar, wrong jurisdiction, go to your mom. So that's the case where the application has been made in a wrong court. So that's a different thing. Then they go to the mom and they say, okay, then mom will say, okay, speak one by one. I want to hear both of them properly. Then the boy will say, this is what happened. I had kept my pen here. She came, she took my pen away, which she did not inform me. Now I'm not able to find it, XYZ. The sister, the younger one, she's a little more naughty and she will say, no, this is not what happened. The pen was never kept there. It was lying on my table, so I picked it up. I asked him, he did not reply, XYZ, whatever. Now, as a judge, you have to decide. Now, those are the issues which has erupted. Whether the pen was on this table or whether the pen was on that table. Whether she asked the brother about it or whether she did not ask the brother. So these are the issues which has emerged from the facts of the case. And this is what we have to do it. Putting it in a tax background. Now, since we are chartered accountants, coming out of the home, I'm going to the professional arena. The issues can be of various types. I've broken it into two parts on the slide, if you see. The first is on the right hand side are the characteristics of the issues. On the left hand side are what different kind of issues arise. So first, looking at the right hand side, the issues are, it can be in a question form issues. There can be a single issue or a multiple issue in a particular case. So if there are 3 additions, so there are multiple issues. If there are only 1 addition, then it's a single issue matter. And each issue is mentioned separately. So that is how the issues are culled out. But issues emerge from what? So emerge from interpretation of law. Now, this is the most common part when we go to High Court. And because only the question of law is admitted and only the question of law is argued before the High Court. Question of facts, tribunal is the last or the final fact finding authority. So all facts get closed there. That doesn't mean that the tribunal doesn't interpret law. Tribunal really interprets the law, and that gets a sanctity from the High Courts and the Supreme Court. So interpretation of law is a very important area where the issues emerge. So if there is a provision, I will say as an SSE that if I have not complied with it, I have not filed an audit report while claiming my benefit under section 80IA, then that provision is merely directory. By not filing an audit report along with the return doesn't mean that you take away my claim. I can file that audit report even during assessment. It should be allowed. Claim should be allowed. The department said no, that provision is mandatory under the law. So what happens is that if you have not filed it, then you lose the benefit irrespective of whether you filed it subsequently or not. So this is an issue, whether that provision of having the requirement of filing an audit report while claiming a benefit under chapter 6 is a mandatory provision or whether it is a directory provision. So that is interpretation of law. There is no dispute about the fact that audit report was not filed. The only issue is whether it was a crime enough to take away the benefit or whether that crime is condonable. So that is what the interpretation of law is, an issue. Then these issues are not in isolation of relevant facts. So you cannot have an issue ignoring the most relevant facts. So if I say that, taking the earlier example itself, that the audit report was not filed, now that is the most relevant fact. I cannot ignore that while deciding this question. I'll have to, as a judge, read it and understand that yes, the report was not filed. If the dispute is whether the report was filed or not filed, then it becomes a different issue. Then it doesn't go on interpretation of law. Then it goes on the final fact finding as to by leading evidence that see, the audit report was filed, it was uploaded on the portal, or it was uploaded, e-filed, whatever. However, there was a technical glitch. I did not get a confirmation, but this is how I can prove it. So those are the disputes which are on facts. So relevant facts, whether the audit report was filed or not filed. Third is, in my arguments before the court, if I rely on a particular judgment, so a precedence means a past judgment of a court, and say that my case is squarely covered by this judgment of Supreme Court, therefore I should be allowed this benefit, or I should be given relief on this. The department may say, no, this judgment is not applicable to you because the law subsequently got amended, and therefore this judgment has lost its relevance in your case. Or it may say that the facts in this case is different from the facts in your case, therefore this judgment is not applicable. So that also becomes an issue before the court, whether that judgment is applicable or not applicable, and a court studies it and gives its verdict accordingly. So these are the various types of issues which can emerge. What I'll do is I'll quickly reiterate it in a different manner. I have explained you in that slide. So it says that the issues raised by the facts peculiar to the case are often stated explicitly by the court in the form of a question, which when we come to actual judgment, I will take you through how that issue is drafted and put in a judgment. Constitutional, I'm not going to discuss this, but I can just tell you, constitutional cases frequently involve multiple issues, some of the interest only to litigants and lawyers, others of broader significant citizen officials, like always stated as a question. So constitutional, there are a lot of constitutional cases which come in before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court is a constitutional court, so they have to interpret, but they are a lot of times purely academic in nature, and that's why I'm not really going by this. Now, having talked about the facts, the first step, the issues by the second fact, I come to the arguments by the party. So I have mentioned as to what all different kind of arguments are taken by each party. So they will, if you look at one, it says there can be a dispute on facts, as I explained, whether the audit report was filed or not filed. Then there could be a dispute on proposition of a law, that whether this particular section is applicable, it is not applicable, whether this section provides enough leeway. To take a simple example, the recent judgment of full bench of Mumbai High Court on 271(1)(c) penalty case, which is a thesis on the penalty notices, the validity of a notice without striking off inaccurate particulars and concealment, and whether it's a valid notice or not. Now there are multiple decisions which are discussed, cited. It's a very long judgment of 63 pages. If you read it, the whole law has been discussed on it, and lot of precedents has been cited on either side by both parties. They have been discussed and they have been distinguished and all, and finally the judges have said no, the notice is invalid if it's not striking off the relevant portion. So that's the proposition of law which parties rely upon. Precedent cited, as I just explained, that in that judgment both parties have relied on past judgment. Mumbai High Court department has relied on earlier Mumbai High Court judgment, which says that this is purely technical and it does not really create any hindrance to the SSC when he's aware that the penalty is going to be levied, so it should not. So there are different ways of looking at the situation. So different precedents are cited. Then finally, statutory provisions, actual provision, what does it say? That is also read That is also understood and that's also relied upon by the parties. So this is how the arguments are framed by parties. After having discussed the facts, the issues involved, argument of all the parties, till this stage the judges, the poor judges, are only listening. They are only reading long arguments, long submissions, long judgments, everything. Now this is the place where they get an opportunity to say something, and judges speak through their orders. That's something which is very interesting, which I've read somewhere, that a judge, that as lawyers, as counsels, we speak in the court, the judges speak through their orders. And this is where the most important part comes in. When we talk about a judgment as a precedence, when we talk about a judgment to be cited, to be relied upon, from here starts the most important part, which you must read very carefully to understand how and why the judge has interpreted the provisions and what kind of decision he has rendered and why he has rendered. So if I get time today, I will take you through a very interesting, very latest judgment of Mumbai ICAI on an issue which is very interesting and very important for all the CA professionals in practice. It's a unreported judgment, unfortunately, but an extremely important one. When I share it with you, you'll be really amazed to see how a provision is interpreted, especially a beneficial provision. So the judges speak is very important, and that's, you must really read it. So in law, a judgment is a decision of a court explaining the rights and liabilities of parties in a legal action or proceeding. Judgment generally provides the court's explanation of why it has chosen to make a particular court order. So a judgment may be provided either in the form of a written or oral form, depending on the circumstances. And, so as far as tax proceedings are concerned, it's always written, but there are oral judgments in different listing on when the stay is granted, status quo is claimed, or when some directions are given to produce something as an evidence. So that can be oral also. And judgment is a mix of the decision and the reasoning. Now this is the punchline. What is decided and why it is decided. So as I explained earlier, the what and why both are important. So when we go ahead and we'll look at it, we'll see what and why is. So this slide broadly, very clearly gives you graphically that a judgment, this is where the court is speaking, that is broken up into two parts, the decision and the reasoning. What is a decision? A decision or holding is the court's answer to a question presented to it. So the question is whether the addition under section 68 for unexplained credit could be made. Answer is no, that is a decision. But why it is not, why that addition is wrongly made and it cannot be made, that why is the reasoning, which is on the right hand side. So decision is the what, reasoning is the why. And decision, if the issue has been drawn precisely, the holding can be stated in a simple yes or no, or in short statements taken from language used by the court. So they will say, we do not find any reason to interfere with the order of CITFD. So that's the decision. Why? That we come to it. The reasoning or the rationale is the chain of arguments which led the judges in either a majority or a dissenting opinion to rule as they did. After looking at the facts and arguments, judges are bound to give a reasoning for their decision. So this is what I have just reiterated what is there. Now, I am not really going too much into it because these are not really applicable to tax proceedings, but they are to civil proceedings. But there are different types of judgment. So there can be a dissenting judgment, there could be a declaratory judgment, but this is not really applicable for us. Now, coming to what, these are two terms which I have just added to broaden your legal side and to explain you what this is. We have really understood all, we have taken all the steps to understand what are the different parts of the judgment. Now let us look at what are the different nature of judgment. So there could be a judgment which is sub silentio. Now sub silentio is without assigning any reason or without dealing with evidence or arguments. That is a sub silentio. So where the judge just says, I do not agree to this or I agree to this, and that is done. But there is no why in it. Now that judgment will not stand, because there is no reasoning, and that's in simple Latin English we say, Latin maxim we say, it's a judgment in subsilentio, so that it doesn't say anything, it just gives the verdict without any reason. So you cannot, it's like a dictator order, so it's not really appreciated. Per incurrium is a judgment which has erred on some facts, it has missed out facts. When I say, I don't say irrelevant facts, some relevant facts, or it has not considered a similar past judgment by the same court or a higher court, and a different verdict has been passed. So that those judgments are in error, and that is why it's known as that these judgments are per incurrium, so they need to be cured. Therefore they are called as per incurrium, and they are there, it may contain error of facts or past precedents which affects the decision taken by the court. So this is, I've just added one slide to explain that these are two certain terms which you may come across at various places. Now coming to the next part as to how to analyze a case law. I have explained you the various parts of the judgment. Now if we look at it from a very simple tax decisions point of view, so there are normally plaintiffs and defendants, but in case of in income tax cases, it's appellant versus the respondent. So I've just explained that if an appeal filed before CIT appeal by the assessee, then the assessee is the appellant and AO is the respondent, and this is fixed because department doesn't file an appeal before the CIT appeal. If there is an error in the order, then 263 or 148 or whatever, but before the CIT appeal, it is always the assessee who's the appellant, respondent is AO. If assessee wins, then the situation changes. Then the AO becomes the appellant and the assessee becomes the respondent, and from the face of the judgment you will know who's the appellant, because the name of the appellant comes first and versus the name of the respondent. So you know who's in appeal, who is the aggrieved party, because his name comes first. Then if AO wins before ITAT, then SSC files an appeal before the High Court, then again the SSC will become the appellant. So this is how the tables, the chairs keep changing, and sometimes somebody is appellant, sometimes somebody else is the appellant. Not a very appreciable situation which I have stated here, and SSC would be happy to be a respondent every time, but this may happen in certain tricky cases, and it does happen, creating a lot of issues for the SSC. Next. Now it's too much of data, I have already shared it. You can really read it at your luxury whenever you feel like, but in short I'll just explain. So what when you're reading when you're analyzing a judgment, what you have to do is you have to first of all, as I explained earlier, isolate the relevant facts. So you should know if notice is not being challenged, I'm not going to bother about notice, when was it issued, whom it was issued, how it was issued, it is not relevant. My issue is about my claim has not been allowed under chapter 6, so I'll focus on relevant facts related to that. So first is isolate the relevant facts, come to the facts which are important, highlight those relevant facts. Yeah, these facts are important for what I am reading. Determine the legal issue raised by the facts, underline that question which the court has put forth in the judgment and said, okay, this is what we are going to decide, whether the appellant SSE was entitled to relief under section 80 IB 10 or 80 IBA now. That is an issue. So I will underline, okay, this is what is the real crux of the issue, and I am going to study that. Then phrase the issue as a yes or no question. So if there could be within that issue, whether he is entitled is a yes or no, but within that there can be sub questions which you can create on your own and say, okay, he's saying that whether his commercial area was more than 5%, so as to entitle him from the claim, yes or no. So you can create it on your own in your mind also while reading a question. So this is how you analyze an issue, and you also analyze what it creates and what will be decided further in the said decision. So you start looking forward to it eagerly as to, okay, what has happened in this case, I want to read it further. Then when you're reading after the issues, when you start reading, then you will understand that when the court is giving its reasoning or the court is writing about the judgment or its view, you will know which precedence which was cited has not been followed by the court. So court will always tell you this was cited by the SSC or by the department, but this is not applicable to the facts of the case for XYZ reason. So that's a very important part. You should know that that is restricting the applicability of a judgment in a particular fact. They will also lay down the rules for each issue separately. As when we'll look at an actual example, I have specifically marked for the benefit of the audience here. They will understand that, okay, how legal rules have been separately mentioned, that, there are general classic rules, all pervasive. So those rules are mentioned by the court, and we should immediately highlight and number them, that, okay, this is the law, this is the rule which will flow through in all the judgments or whatever legal side I will work on. So those rules you have to identify. Then acts, provisions, and procedures applied. This is very simple. If you know it's a section 68 matter, I have to read section 68. I have to read about section 143 to whether opportunity of hearing was granted to me, not granted to me, whether I was granted an opportunity to submit confirmations, whether the AO issued summon under 131 to the lenders or not, calling for the details on my request. So all those things will come in when you read a particular issue. Then fact is the basis. As I explained earlier, change in a fact will change the rule, and this happens normally in a lot of cases, especially when it's relating to section 54F about the house property having been sold within 1 year before or 2 years after, and whether the agreement was registered, whether the payment was made. So it is very difficult to apply a precedence, because in a particular case, the court may have held that, okay, yes, if the registration has taken place later, but if the payment was made earlier, then you are entitled to section 54 benefit. Now you feel very happy and you say, oh, my client's case is covered by this decision. But when you see your client's case, you realize, no, in your case, registration is also done later and the payment is also done later. So you cannot say that, okay, that judgment is applicable. So that's how the change in the fact will change the rule. You cannot apply the same precedence. So you have to be very careful matching the facts of the case which you are relying upon with the facts which has available before you. So that you should be doing. Now, when I was talking about the rules as to how the rules are applied, so those rules are normally laid down in the past by some different courts. So what they'll do is that they will say that in the past, in so and so judgment, this law has been laid down. So they will enunciate the law, they will propound it, they will expound it, they will cite it, and that's how they will lay down a particular rule. That those rules are something which you have to remember, because they become the precedents. Like the judge will use in somebody else's case earlier judgment. Same way, when you are citing, you will rely upon this judgment as well as the judgment on which this judgment is relied upon. So that will give you a fairly good idea as to how to read and analyze the judgment. Now, in some cases, the judges, this is a little tricky, but I'll try to explain. The judges merely say that, okay, we are just applying this rule. So they will say, applying the rule of adjustum generis. Now, you should know what adjustum generis means. They will not really go deeper into it, because they will treat it as consider that the reader of that judgment is aware that what adjustum generis means. It means of the same kind. So they will know that, okay, this is applied. So, okay, that this is how it has been done. So they may not be really elaborating on that, but you know that that's a law, that's a rule laid down. So those rules can be in long paragraphs. It could be citation of an earlier decision, or it can be a very small 1 or 2 lines. So you have to understand where the rules are. The rules again are not in isolation of the facts. So the rule will apply only if the facts permit it to apply. So when you're reading and mentioning the rules, you have to also ensure that the facts, the rule which you're applying applies to your set of facts as well. It should not so happen that rule is specific to certain facts. So be very careful applying the rules to the facts. After having found the rules, try to see whether it's applying on your facts or not. Typically, when as a lawyer, as a chartered accountant, you want to distinguish a judgment of department, so department is relying on a judgment and saying that in this judgment it has been held so and so, and therefore SSC's case is wrong. Your ability as a chartered accountant would come in if you can tell the judge that the rule which department is relying upon based on this judgment was given on these set of facts, and my case the facts are different, so this rule cannot be applied. That's a very important argument, and it's a very tricky thing, and the efficacy and the quality of your professional caliber will come in at this point, where you can distinguish and you can break or you can demolish the department's reliance on a judgment or the rule laid down in that judgment against you based upon the facts of your case and say these facts are not applicable. So that will immediately convince the judge, oh, okay, I don't have to read this judgment, it's not relevant to the case before me, and that's half the battle won. So very important tip, whoever has been citing judgments and been able distinguishing the judgments of the department, try to call out the rule which the department is working on and challenge the facts with your set of facts, and then say that these facts are not these facts are different, so the rule is different. So it is important to know that in Supreme Court cases, the court won't have accepted the case in appeal if it didn't present a new issue that has already been decided in earlier case. This is only if there, the Supreme Court you go to and they don't really find anything new, so they won't admit it. It's more on SLP, special leave petitions. While reading the judgment, you highlight the fact as, again, coming back, that the relevant facts. What are the relevant facts? You have to highlight those which the court found most important. So what will happen? The facts will be reproduced or will be mentioned twice in a judgment. Once the facts will be mentioned in the beginning of the order, also along with or in the when the arguments of the parties are being mentioned. Out of those, so say if the 10 facts are mentioned and the judges found 2 facts important for the judgment, then those 2 facts will be mentioned again by the judge when the judge is writing what he has to say. So when he's giving his reason, when we were talking about reasoning, he will invariably mention or reiterate those facts which the judges found most important. So you must know and must highlight, okay, this is the fact which the judge found important. Out of 10 facts, these 2 facts, and he's basing his decision on these 2 facts. So that's very, very important, and that you will understand once you read the judge's side of the story. And again, it's reiterating the same thing, that the rule which the judgment that court will lay down will be based upon the 2 facts which it has culled out from 10 facts, and it will work on those only. It will ignore the balance sheet, and that is again a point where you can treat it as an open door for you to distinguish the judgment of the department by saying that this decision of the court is based upon these 2 facts, but my facts, the other facts are important, not these 2 facts, and therefore this rule doesn't apply. So it's a very mathematical kind of a thing, with a lot of precision. You can really put it on a paper, draw a table, and you can work out, okay, this is the decision department's relying upon. They are relying upon these 2 facts as important, but these 2 facts do not appear in my case, so therefore this rule is not applicable. The moment you do this, the judges before you are appearing will immediately understand, oh, this is a wrong citation by the department, and they will not consider it. And we will be I'll show you as an example today when we are discussing an actual judgment. Now another thing, when I said in the beginning that a judgment is an important part of law, does it mean that it is to be read like a statute? No. A judgment is rendered by a judge based on his own vocabulary and English and understanding. It cannot be treated like a provision of law and read like that. It is to be read in a broader sense. Now, this is a very important paragraph, I would say, which when you read, you will understand that the Supreme Court was aghast at wrong citations or incorrect decisions being cited at every time, and they would say, oh, this is not applicable to your facts, why are you citing this? So this is where the Supreme Court has really gone vocal and said something which I will read out because it's something very, very important and should become the base of your, while reading judgment. It is neither desirable nor permissible to pick out a word or a sentence from a judgment of this court, divorced from the context of the question under consideration and treat it to be the complete law declared by the court. So what the Supreme Court is saying, that you have to read the judgment in the context of question before it, not divorced from it. So that's, again, we are going back to the same thing, that the issue, what was the question before it, is what the judge is answering, nothing more than that. So don't read it divorced from that. The judgment must be read as a whole, and the observations from judgment has to be considered in the light of question which were before the court. A decision of this court takes its color from the questions involved, which it is rendered, and while applying the decision to a later case, the courts must carefully try to ascertain the true principle laid down by the decision and not to pick out words or sentences from the judgment under consideration to support their reasoning. So Supreme Court is really threatening here and saying, please, while reading the judgments, read it in the context of what that judge was required to answer. It should not so happen that in your case the question is different, the judgment and the precedents you are relying upon there, the question was different, but you are putting the rule there. So that the judges have said that be very careful about, don't do that. And the next term, this is a term which a lot of people are, what is ratio decided. So it is very simply put, it is the reason or the reasoning of the court on a particular issue, which is known as ratio decided. And you can, you can read it. I've shared this, so you can read it at luxury. But simply speaking, it's ratio decided is the reason of the court on a decision which they have taken. What is an obiter dicta? Now, a lot of times courts make passing reference, and they also they go beyond the question before them, or they go beyond the issue before them, and they want to say something or advise something. Those are known as obiter dicta. So those obiter dicta of Supreme Court are a binding precedents, but of lower courts do not have a binding precedence, because that is an obiter dicta which is not really argued by both parties. So it's just a demonstration or just a exhibition of the judge of his reason somewhere to put something which is very, very relevant. So if time permits, the Mumbai IT judgment which I mentioned, a small judgment, I'll show you what an obiter dicta is. There the tribunal has laid down an obiter dicta, which I'll read out if the time permits to make it clearer. Next, I explained this, that the obiter dicta of Supreme Court is binding. You can read this at luxury. That obiter dicta is not something which is I'm going to discuss here. On all fours means it's your case and the precedents you are relying upon, the past decision, it's fitting it completely on facts, on law, it's the same. So that's why we call it as on for all fours. So the decision I am cited is on all fours with my case. That is how I say. So that's the phrase used, on all fours. Stare decisis is, again, it's the precedential value of a judgment. It's a precedence. So when we say that the Supreme Court has in so and so judgment said this, so it's a stare decisis. So it's decided and it's put into a proper format that this is what the rule is, this is what the law is, and everybody is under the Constitution bound to follow that Supreme Court decision. So that's what a stare decisis is. Now, when you'll read a judgment, you'll also come across these words. Now, what are these words? These words are that where the Supreme Court is relying upon, or the court or the tribunal is relying upon some other decision. They may approve some other decision. So Supreme Court, by implication, has approved something, or they disapprove. They say, no, this judgment we are not agreeing. Or the judges dissent on something. They say that that they are not agreeing to whatever has been said either in that decision by one judge, or they may disagree or dissent with the precedent cited before them and say that no, that judgment was wrongly decided, or we dissent with it, we do not agree with it, it was not good law. So that's they are showing a dissent to that judgment. Now, this is where I close the part A of the presentation, and I believe I have not really gone too fast. I don't know whether from where I can see the comments or anything coming in here, but I just wanted to get a quick feedback on what is the view till now, and whether you people have understood, and am I okay on my speed, because I am unfortunately speaking only to a screen. I don't have the benefit of live audience before me. So I just wanted to know, and I don't know from the screen where I can see the comments or texts in this. Just 1 second. If someone can, just put in certain text so I can understand that all are there and they're listening and they are understanding whatever we have been doing till now. So I'll take a breather here.
Yes.
Yes, please.
I will just make yourself for presenter organizer so they can see the questions, because as a panelist they can't see the chat, because only the questions box will work here.
Yes, but I didn't want to take the questions right now, since I want to take you through two actual case laws to explain the various parts, which has been displayed by me on the screen as well. So before this is the part B of the presentation, because I believe we have time. So I wanted to quickly take you through all this so that, and then I can take questions. But before that, I just thought that I should know that I am not speaking only to a screen, but to people. And it's, these webinars have a strange problem that when you're speaking, you don't know whether everybody's there, they're listening, am I okay, or they don't get feedback, which you get as a live speaker. So that's why I was just asking. I was wanting to just catch my breath and also understand that. So if some people can just text or say.
Yes, sir. I made Sneha's ma'am organizer so she can see the chat, sir. Chat in the sense questions box that you can see. So they feel that it's in the correct place and.
Okay. So she has to click on the questions and to see. Okay.
If she scroll down, I can see 6:12 onwards.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I can. Yeah, I can see some very interesting questions coming in. So I'm grateful. I'm really thankful that people are there and they're listening and they're attentive to it. And I can see a lot of interesting questions. I would love to take them. But what I'll do is I quickly take you through a couple of judgments to explain the theoretical part in actual live cases. So you'll really appreciate the judgment also, as well as you'll appreciate the various parts. What I've done is, for the benefit of the audience, whatever parts we discussed, if you remember that slide of a man walking up the steps, the first was the facts, the issue, the argument by the parties, then the judgment, and judgment has two parts of decision and the reasoning. How they have been marked in this particular judgment, I am sharing it. This will also give you an insight as to how I, as a professional, when I'm reading the judgment, I do my marking. You may or may not follow it. You can devise your own method or manner in which to do it. Secondly, it will also give you an idea on the technology part, because this is how I store the judgments after marking it and making my notes in my database for future reference. So whoever is in appellate practice and wants to go through judgments or to understand, and they want to create a database of some good judgments, they will understand as to, okay, this is how it is read and this is how it is stored for future reference, because you can't possibly memorize everything, but it will give you a good idea and how technology is being used. It will give you an idea. Your smartphone will really become very smart if you can do this. And that's what I've done. I've invested in a smartphone. So I go through the judgments on my smartphone itself, and I make my notes on the smartphone itself while traveling. Nowadays, that luxury is not there of traveling. But whenever I'm sitting idle or whatever, or I want to read a judgment, I can do it only on In a paperless environment, I can make notes, annotate it in the PDF format, and from there itself I can transfer it to my laptop or to my cloud, and I can store it. So that also you'll get some idea about it. Now this is a judgment by the Delhi ITAT. It's a fairly recent judgment. If you see the date, it is delivered on 19th of July 2021. So I have picked up the absolutely latest judgment. We are today on 29th, so it's a 10-day-old judgment itself. Now go up, and to show you the parties and the tribunal. So it's the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal Delhi bench judgment. So this is going to give you an idea that this is a forum. The name of the quorum, basically the quorum is the judges or the members who were involved. If you see, it gives the ITA number to. Now this is not the citation, as I stated earlier. ITA numbers are the numbers generated by the Delhi tribunal for its own administrative reasons and for reporting purpose, but this is not the official ITR or ITD. This thing, assessment years involved are mentioned. Then it says DCIT Central Circle 6 versus Sahara India Sahakari Awas Samiti Limited. What it means is that the DCIT is the appellant. So here the department is in appeal and Sahara is the respondent. That means Sahara has won before the CIT appeal, and the tribunal may be now the department has come to tribunal appealing against the order of the CIT appeal. But that's not the whole part of it. If you see, it mentions CO numbers. Now CO numbers means cross objection. Now cross objection numbers is that even the assessee has filed some appeal against the CIT appeal order. So both of them are clubbed and heard together for a common, complete, holistic disposal. So that's why in one order you have the department versus the assessee, and the same way you have assessee versus the department. So Sahara India versus DCIT Central Circle. This is how it is. Then whoever appeared, date of hearing and date of pronouncement, it's mentioned. Now, so this will give you an idea that when it was heard and when it was decided. So the first page has given you broadly a lot of idea that this is a case where both are in appeal for different reasons, or for the same reason we'll go ahead and see. And this is decided by Delhi ITAT and it is decided on so and so date. Okay. Now we go to the order. Now when the order starts, it starts with parties to the dispute. I have mentioned it for the benefit of the audience here. I don't really need to write it. When I am doing it, I don't need to write it because I have understood who are the parties from the face of the order itself as we went through it. So parties to the dispute. Then what they have done, they have taken first the appeal by the revenue. So I have highlighted by revenue, ITA number so and so. Then it says, the judgment says, facts of the case in brief. Now look at how quickly the judges have gone on the facts of the case, because they know it's the facts which is the backbone of a judgment. So they have quickly started mentioning the facts. That facts in brief are that assessee is a cooperative society engaged in the business of development and construction of residential and commercial units. I have highlighted only the most relevant part. Now I have ignored it filed its return of income on 30th March and blah, 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 blah. I have ignored that. Okay. Then I further go down and I have highlighted assessee is not eligible to claim the deduction under 80 IB 10 since it does not fulfill the conditions. Now I have understood what the issue is. So in the by para 3, I have understood who are the parties, what happened at CIT appeal level, who came in appeal, and what is the assessee doing and what is the issue. So the issue here is that as a builder, he claimed 80 IB 10 benefit of tax of 100% tax exemption, which has not been allowed by the assessing officer on the ground that some conditions of 80 IB 10 have not been fulfilled. So quickly, how quickly we have jumped to the facts, the parties involved, who's in appeal, what is the issue in appeal. So this is how you can, now what AO says, what are the conditions not fulfilled? He has quickly mentioned. Built up area of the shop exceeds the prescribed limit. I have not gone on further details, 5% of so and so or 2,000 and 30,000. I just skip. Okay. The issue is that built up area exceeds the prescribed limit. Completion certificate did not produce such certificate. The assessee cannot be regarded as a developer since it was not actively involved due to non-employment of capital and labor. Now, these are the three reasons because of which the 80IB 10 benefit has been taken away. So I have understood what the department has done. Then he says, it was further submitted that provisions of 80IB 10 of the base year in which layout was approved shall be applicable to the assessee. So what happened? No. Now, in the fourth paragraph, they are mentioning the history of the case. When I was saying that the history of the case is mentioned, in the fourth paragraph, they are mentioning the history of the case, saying that the assessing officer issued show cause, why claim should not be allowed. The assessee in its reply submitted, then what all it submitted, what was the evidence, plot is of the so and so size, layout plan has been approved, satisfies the condition. Now, none of them are in argument or none of them are in dispute because we saw what was the three conditions which the AO says is not fulfilled. So we will focus our attention only on those three and we will treat this as is more or less irrelevant. So that's why I have not marked anything out of it. Just to explain you, I have said that this is how history has been mentioned in the order. Then it says it was further submitted in yellow. What I do is I use two different colors for where the department, what department is saying, and I use a different color where assessee is saying. So now yellow is my favorite color for assessee. So I said it was further, I highlighted it. It says further submitted that the provisions of 80IB 10 of the base year in which the layout plan of assessee was approved shall be applicable to the assessee. Now, this is the legal argument of the assessee. Okay, therefore, I have said assessee argument based on law. If you see, when you annotate, sometimes the words are not together. So it's mentioned where the cursor is. It says assessee argument is based on law. This is I have noted for my own analysis purpose. Okay, this is the argument he has taken. Now, in this gray color in para 5 is what the department is saying. So if you see, it says, however, the AO was not satisfied. Why he was not satisfied? He says that provisions of section 80IB 10D was inserted with effect from 1/4/2005, applicable to 2005-6. As per said provision, built up area could not exceed 5%. So he says this amendment came on 1/4/2005, should not exceed 5%, and we saw that the AY involved were 5/6 and 6/7. So therefore he says that this amendment was applicable to this particular assessment year since you have made more commercial area than prescribed 5%. Therefore he has taken away the benefit. So by reading this much, you have understood the story, what is going to come forward, and you have understood what has happened before the AO level. So now I have skipped all this because I didn't find it too relevant, and I go, he further noted that second point. So first point, he says that that amendment came in, therefore you have exceeded 5%. Then he says, he records a fact. This is important. He says, on perusal of booking application form shows that these are addressed to Sahara India Commercial Corporation Limited and not to the society. Now this is an appeal of the society, not of the company. So he says that although this society is saying that it is a developer, but what it is actually doing is that some other company known as Sahara India Commercial Corporation is booking the flats. Then he's saying that he observed that SSE has authorized that company to collect the money directly for and on behalf of SSE. So two facts he has noted, fact 1 and fact 2. Why these two facts he has noted? He has noted these two facts to establish that this SSE is not the developer. When we saw the three issues on the top, one was because of the commercial area, one issue was that he has not submitted the completion certificate, and the third issue was that this SSE is not the developer since there was no labor and capital employed. We read all that. Here, the assessing officer is making a ground by noting certain facts. Now, these facts are not disputed. Assessee is not saying that this is wrong. Assessee is saying, yes, booking application was done by the company. Assessee is agreeing that, yes, the money was being collected directly on by behalf by SICCL. So these are undisputed facts. And based on these two facts, the assessing officer has disallowed it. Now, in your case, if you use it as a precedence, if these facts do not exist, some other facts exist, then you cannot really use it as a precedence. So this is where importance comes in. So department is relying on these two facts, undisputed facts, to take away the claim of the assessee. Go further. Now in para 7 it says that the CIT appeal allowed the claim of the assessee. So that we have already understood from by reading the beginning part of it, when assessee is in department is in appeals, that means the CIT appeal is allowed. Now why has he allowed? I have again mentioned in a yellow highlight because that's favoring me. So whatever is favoring me as an SSC or SSC CA, I highlighted in yellow. It says these conditions were not in existence on the date when the approval was granted by the development authority. So what he's saying, that the amendment which the assessing officer was relying upon, which came in AY 5.6, was not there of limit of 5% commercial area prior to 1/4/2005. It was not there when the plans were sanctioned. So this is one observation of the CIT appeal. Secondly, the observation is of the CIT appeal that appointment of SICCL, that company, was as a contractor for development, and it cannot lead to the conclusion that development and construction was not carried by the SSC. So now you have got the gist of the entire judgment. We have already very quickly scanned, and we have, it's a 23-page order. We are already on page 6, where we have understood what has happened in the assessment stage, what was the issue, what were the issues in the entire assessment, what CIT appeal has done, and why he has done. So so much of it's covered in 6 pages itself. Quickly we have covered. Okay. Then aggrieved by such order, the revenue is in appeal. We know. Okay, they have filed CO. Okay. Then this is para 9, is where the department is arguing, because I've highlighted in gray color, and I have also mentioned in red font for your benefit, where it says revenues argument. It says learned DR submitted that the SSC did not claim to have obtained the completion certificate, which is a necessary condition. Therefore, AO rightly did not allow the claim. Secondly, he says, I have put one above 2 here. Since the years under consideration are 5, 6, and 6, 7, therefore the aforesaid conditions are applicable. So he says amendment came in from 1/4/2005. Therefore, that 5% commercial area condition should be applicable. Then he observes a fact. Then he further points a fact. He says, referring to a letter filed on 10/11/2008 before the AO for 6/7, he submitted, as per the letter, the assessee was in process of obtaining completion certificate from Lucknow Development Authority. This shows that even up to 10/11/2008, that is the date of filing of a aforesaid letter, the certificate was not there with the assessee. So he is relying on an evidence. This is where he is leading an evidence to put forth his argument that there was no completion by the due date, which was necessary for getting the benefit. So 3 things he has said: that the law got amended, it was applicable to the assessment year. He says that this letter was on record. This is how he's presenting his case before the tribunal. Go further. Then he doesn't stop there. The department's lawyer is really hardworking person. He's also mentioning a particular case law. He's saying he's relying on an Allahabad High Court judgment in the case of Arif Industries, dated so and so, reported in 80 taxmen. So he's given a citation. And he says that at para 61 of the order has held that he's relying on Allahabad High Court, and he's saying that no developer can claim vested right to complete a housing project in indefinite period. The court observed that the right arising from 80 IB 10 is coupled with the obligation or duty to complete the project in a specified time frame, and if a developer does not complete within specified time, he will not receive the benefit. So he's saying completion certificate was not produced, rather a letter was there on the assessment record which clearly evidenced that the completion of the project was not done, and the judgment of Allahabad High Court, which is a jurisdictional high court, which says that the project, if it is not completed within time, it will not receive the benefit. It further says that the Allahabad High Court has relied on another judgment of Madhya Pradesh High Court in the case of CIT versus Global Realty, reported in 379 ITR 107. So these are the judgments or the precedents which are being relied upon by the department, which while taking the part A, I was explaining that department will cite its side of judgments. It's very interesting to read how it has been distinguished or how the SSC argues against these judgments. Let's see that. Then learned DR further submitted. That means the department's argument is continuing in the order that the assessee could not obtain the completion certificate before 31st March 2008, which was the cutoff date. Therefore, and it further is the letter of assessee written to AO clearly highlight that issue of completion certificate was in process even in 2011. So he says there is no question that it could be done. Go further. Then he says that assessee was not engaged as a developer, not eligible. He submitted there was no employee on the rolls of assessee, which is evidenced by audit report. Therefore, the claim of the assessee being a developer does not hold good. Now, so much of data he has presented, the evidence, audit report, everything. Then he goes on, and remarkable, that brilliant DR. He says that the authenticity of additional evidence which has been filed by the assessee now, a completion certificate and whatever, is dated 14th March 2008, while the acknowledgement issued by assessee to developer is dated 18th March 2008. So he is bringing out that whatever documents are being submitted by the assessee before the tribunal for the first time as an additional evidence are also doubtful. So he's demolishing the evidence of the assessee. And then he has made a prayer that application for additional evidence should not be entertained, for which he has given 2 citations why they should not be entertained. Further, he has relied upon various judgments to highlight that the 80 IB10 denial was absolutely correct. And this is where para 14 I have mentioned. It will come on your screen shortly. Yes, it says assessee's arguments. Now, till here the department has argued, it has cited on judgments, it has relied on the evidence on record, the letters, the audit report, and the law, and has said that why 80 IB10 cannot be allowed. Now the assessee starts arguing, and assessee says, assessee is relying on the Supreme Court judgment in the case of Sarkar Builders, reported in 375 ITR and Vatika Township, so and so, submitted that Supreme Court has held that the conditions of 80 IB10D cannot be applied to project approved prior to 1/4/2005. So since it's a Supreme Court decision, first ground of disallowance, first ground saying that this amendment came and 5% limit was applicable, it's extremely clear that that has gone out of the window, because now there is a Supreme Court binding judgment, nobody can do anything. So he has killed that first point. Second point, he says, so far as the condition for obtaining completion certificate is concerned, this condition was also introduced with effect from 1/4/2005 and was not in existence when project was approved. Therefore, the said condition was prospective and not applicable to projects approved prior to 1/4/2005. So he says that I don't have any responsibility or obligation to do it. And then he has further relied upon that those certain judgments to highlight that. On the third ground, saying that now additional evidence is submitted and this, so he has produced more evidences which he has mentioned, letters from so and so, and then he has submitted that these can be taken and considered whether I have completed the project or not on time. Okay, go further. Then he says on the ground of whether the developer was rightly appointed or not, he says merely appointing SICCL as a contractor for development and construction cannot lead to conclusion, not carried. This is exactly what CIT appeal had done. He further substantiates saying assessee is bearing the entire risk and responsibility relating to project, and SICCL was appointed only to execute the project. Therefore, the assessee ought to be considered as developer. And then he has relied on plethora of judgments which are attached to his paper book. Then he says that merely because certain procedural formalities relating to collection of booking forms and collection of money was given to SICCL does not mean that he is not the developer. It says these are procedural formalities that could have been done by anyone. Then he makes a final blow and he says that in the earlier years, that is 2003, 4 and 4, 5, these conditions of 80 IB10 has already been examined. There is no change in the factual position, and therefore now in the further years of 5, 6, you cannot take away my benefit. So there is he's relying upon his own past assessment record to say that the rule of consistency should be applied, and though res judicata is not applicable, but when there is no change in the facts, then you cannot do it. Coming to the decision of Allahabad High Court, he says that the Allahabad High Court relied upon the judgment of MP High Court, and that judgment of MP High Court has been stayed by Supreme Court. He has also filed the copy of order of Honorable Supreme Court staying the proceedings. So he says the entire judgment of Allahabad High Court was based on MP High Court. MP High Court has been stayed, so therefore Allahabad High Court cannot be followed. So department's judgments he has demolished. Then, relying on the Majestic Developers case, he submitted that the certificate from a registered architect, certified architect, is sufficient to prove the completion. I don't require a formal completion certificate from the corporation. So he says that when I have submitted this certificate, I should be granted the benefit, and there should be no requirement of producing the certificate from corporation. That requirement from corporation came in a subsequent years, and his project was approved earlier. So now at this stage, you know the facts of the case, you know the issue involved, and you know the both sides what they have argued and said. Now from here the judges speak. Page number para number 23 onwards, the judges are going to speak. Now what they say is, first of all, they say we find assessee is a cooperative society. Then they say a development agreement was entered into between assessee and the company, wherein assessee appointed the company to construct so and so. So this is a relevant fact one I have mentioned. Why I have mentioned relevant fact one here is only for the reason that this fact is closely connected with the issue in the appeal. The issue is whether this assessee is a developer or not, right? So this fact that there was a development agreement executed through which SICCL was to construct on behalf of Sahara Society, this is a relevant fact. Then they say that the project map was approved on 26 March 2003. Now this is also a relevant fact. Why this is a relevant fact? Because we saw that they argued on that the amendment came in the year which is subsequent year, and by that time their plan was passed, and based on Sarkar Builders judgment of Supreme Court, that amendment is not applicable because they are here on 26 March 2003. So these are very relevant facts they have noted. Then they are reproducing the entire thing, why they disallowed, what happened and all that. Now this in green is basically the judgment or the order of the tribunal. Now what the judges are saying, the members are saying, they say first they say the issue stands settled in favor of SSC by decision of Supreme Court in Sarkar Builders, where it has been held that restrictions on the commercial space has come with effect from 1/4/2005. It cannot be applied to projects approved earlier. So this is a closed issue. So that issue is out. Then they say, then the issue of additional evidence come in, that they have further submitted additional evidences like architect certificate and all that. So they say that as per Rule 29 of ITAT rules, they say we deem it fit and proper to restore the issue to the file of AO, that you adjudicate whether it was completed by 31st March or not, in view of the decision, the evidences which has been filed now before the tribunal. Then they say, I marked it as relevant fact 3, says we find means they have found it as a fact. The condition of developer was decided and allowed in the initial years, that is 2003, 4 and 4, 5, which is evident from the order of CIT appeal for 5, 6. So they say that there it is mentioned that 3, 4 and 4, 5 already department has accepted the claim of the assessee. And then I have mentioned Rule 1. Now this is the law which they are giving. They say the same is not open for examination in subsequent years in absence of change in the factual position. In our opinion, without disturbing the assessment for the initial assessment year, it is not open to revenue to make disallowance of deduction in subsequent year by taking a contrary stand. Now, why I have mentioned Rule 1 here, these are the law laid down which becomes the binding precedents. So basically, when you have to cite this, you can cite this part even in a case which is not on ICAI 10, but laying down a proposition that if you're on the same set of facts, earlier years have been assessed and you have been granted benefit, or say you have the department has accepted certain things, they cannot challenge those in subsequent years. This is so very important because this is the rule they have laid down. Okay. Then, so that's why I have mentioned rule 1. Now I have mentioned rule 2, which says, since the assessee is bearing the risk and responsibility relating to project, and SICACL was appointed only to execute the project, therefore, in the light of ratio of various decisions relied upon by the assessee ought to be considered as developer and cannot be denied a benefit. Now, this is a restrictive rule. It is applicable only in case of ATIB 10 or now ATIBA, that where the entire risk and responsibility is on the assessee, then he will be treated as a developer irrespective of the fact that he doesn't have an employee, the collection is done on by someone else on his behalf, the bookings are done by someone else on his behalf. Still, he will be treated as a developer only for the reason that the entire risk and responsibility of the project is on him. So this is also a legal principle they have laid down. That's why I have mentioned as rule. Then they have mentioned, we find merit in the argument of counsel that merely because certain procedural formalities, it would not render it, since the money collected was on behalf of the assessee and on the authorization of assessee and not in its independent capacity. So this is a fact they have recorded. So it's a relevant fact that although they were collecting money, but on behalf of the assessee. So therefore, there is nothing wrong in it. And then they lay down the rule 3. They say, therefore, in our opinion, delegation of certain formalities regarding collection of booking and money on behalf of assessee would not seize the assessee company as being rendered as a developer of the project. So if you are bearing the entire risk and reward, and if you are these formalities are being still carried out by someone else, you don't, there is no problem, you will still continue to be a developer. So this is a rule which they have laid down. Then in yellow, I have talked about that in view of the above discussion. Now this is the order. What we read was the reasoning. Now this is the final order. Objection number 1 and 3 by AO, while denying so and so, are rejected since the assessee in opinion has fulfilled the condition regarding the built up and so and so. However, the third objection relating to the obtaining of completion certificate prior to 31st March is restored to the file of AO for fresh adjudication. So they have sent back that. So now you know what they have done. They have accepted certain parts. They have said, no, these all issues do not exist. As far as additional evidence relating to completion of 31st March, they have relegated it back to the AO saying that you verified. This is the order. So that's why I mentioned the order. So the various parts are mentioned. This was a 23-page order, which we probably, even after detailed discussion, we have covered it in say less than 20 minutes or whatever. Now, having completed this, I just wanted to ask the conveners whether we have time to take another decision or whether we should go on the questions. As they say, we can go do that. It's 6:43 on my clock. So whether we should continue or
Sir, we'll take a question if possible, and if it is completed, if time permits, we can take the second question.
Sure. Okay, that's great. So
we have 10 minutes. No problem. I'll share my screen, sir. 1 minute.
Okay. Okay.
Just some 5 to 8 questions. We'll take it out. So my screen is visible.
Yes. So it says, first is, sir, in a faceless assessment, very interesting question. Reading faceless assessment, I understood what is going to be asked. Assessment order is passed for nil tax, but the computation is for some crores and demand likewise. No rectification was possible as is frightened. Who is responsible for? See, this is, I don't believe this question can be really answered in this forum. I can understand your frustration, my dear friend, but I think we all go through it, and as a professional, we have to be immune to these pains. We are professionals. We can't really get emotional on these things. We have a remedy provided by the statute, and however effective or ineffective that may be, we have to use that. Having said that, I can tell you that recently there is a spurt of writs filed before the various high courts, Delhi, Bombay, where the high courts have intervened in certain high-pitched assessments being made in a faceless environment on the basically ground of where there's been a violation of principle of natural justice and proper opportunity was not given on various grounds. So, I mean, that's the kind of remedy you can look at. So I understand your pain, but I think that's the legal remedy you can think of. Second, what is the logic for a judgment being reported? Is this based on weightage of the case? Please clarify. Now, that's a very good question. See, what happens is normally the courts, higher courts, the High Court and Supreme Court have their own system, which judgment will be reported and which not. So they mention it on the order, saying that this is reportable, fit for reporting, or they say, they don't say anything, or they say not to be reported. Now, based upon that, High Court, Supreme Court, those decisions are reported. Coming to the tribunal part of it, now tribunal orders are normally picked up by these publishers, and they make their own, view as to whether it should be published or not. But let me tell you, with the advent of so many portals and tax portals coming in, the reporting has really become very sharp and gone up. As we discussed today, a judgment which is just 10 days old judgment, that which has, again, I have received it from a tax portal. So the reportings have become very quick and fast, and that's something which is nice. And based on that, we can just decide, okay, this is what is relevant for me or not relevant for me. So higher courts have their own way of reporting, but at tribunal level, yes, almost everything gets reported which is worth reporting. I can't see the questions now. Yeah, okay. Coming to the third question, Honorable Supreme Court order dated 27/4 has extended the limit in respect of judicial requirement. However, circular number is restricted. Will the circular hold good? See, all these matters are already before the courts in various writs. Stay has been granted based on 148 proceedings, in certain orders 143(3), where 144B was not followed. Let's wait for what the courts will say. My view is, that Supreme Court order definitely mentions about special law, general law. It talks about proceedings. But as we said, sometimes what happens is that we tend to read an order like a statute. And this is exactly what somebody may say, that, okay, Supreme Court did extend the limitation period for all judicial, quasi-judicial proceedings. And therefore, that circular cannot curtail that going beyond the Supreme Court judgment. But we'll have to see how courts take a view on that, because if I go by that, this 27th April 2021 order of the Supreme Court, then even 148 proceedings, there are a lot of leeway which the department will get, and ultimately department is going to get controlled by the statute under which it's created and it's operated. It's an interesting point. Let us see. I mean, wherever it helps you, you may use it. But I believe that when the court passed this order, Supreme Court, it had civil proceedings in its mind, where the law of limitation was applicable, like check bouncing cases or other civil cases, arbitration proceedings. Tax proceedings, it probably did not have it in its mind, but you are absolutely right in your observation that the order is very widely worded, and it can have an impact where it says that, okay, the subsequent circulars could not have overridden that. Anyway, let's see what happens. Now, this is relating to some specific company issues, trade discount, office disallows discount, so and so should have been deducted, agreement with not. So what's the question? One of the grounds of disallowance is that terms in the agreement between the parties clearly provide payment. Hence, the AO disallowed. Now, can the company quote the same case law in their favor, stating that in Prasar Bharati case, the disallowance was on the ground of terms of agreement? Yes, absolutely. See, whenever you are reading a judgment, you read it with this thing paramount in your mind, that judgment may have been decided against the assessee in that particular case, but the findings or the rule laid down could be applied in your set of facts in your favor. It happens many times, especially if you see a lot of judgments about transfer, when is an asset treated as transfer for capital gain purposes. You will find that a lot of judgments which are against the assessee, said to be against the assessee, have been used subsequently in favor of it, like what is the date of possession and all those. So what higher courts do is they lay down a law. They don't lay down that it's in whose favor. So if that law helps you, if that judgment helps you, then you can definitely call out that principle and use it in your set of facts of case and say, that in that case it was decided against the SSC, but that finding or the rule of law is in my favor and it has to be applied. That's a very good question, I would say, and very well thought of also, I'll say. Can we just go down further, because I think we have already seen this. Okay. Is it necessary to have written judgment followed by oral judgment? So what happens is that written judgment up to a particular forum, say till High Court, is mandatory, because how else will you appeal against it? If you have to appeal against an oral judgment, what will you file before the Supreme Court? How will the Supreme Court know what were the reasonings and everything? Now, when we use the term judgment, let me tell you that judgment is a very wide term. Now, from a tax proceeding point of view, I will say that 100% orders have to be in written, because that's how AO will give effect to it. How will you give effect to it? You know, all those things. So that it has to be in writing. But when we talk about civil proceedings, then obviously things change a little, and there can be written orders, written oral directions by the court in various proceedings, which both the sides agree and adhere to. You know, those, but they are not final judgments or decrees or anything. They are merely some intermittent orders of that, okay, we are adjourning this case on so and so date or this and that. So there's no fresh notice given. So you have to just note it like that. So those can be oral or verbal. 6 is, please elaborate upon the applicability of High Court decision in states other than the states in which judgments are pronounced. So, okay, this is the law of precedence. Now, it's you know, very simplistically put, without going too much into the nitty-gritties of it. I'll say that a jurisdictional High Court is binding on all so if it's a Chennai High Court, then it will apply to all the authorities in Chennai. Bombay High Court will apply to everywhere in Bombay High Court. Then, if there is no binding judgment of your own territorial High Court, but there is a judgment of a different High Court, which is in your favor, that will prevail. If there are two decisions of a different High Court, not of your jurisdictional High Court, but of two different High Courts, one against you, one in your favor, then the decision in SSC's favor has to be considered as binding precedents. Obviously, if there's a Supreme Court thing, then Supreme Court will prevail over everything under Article 141 of Constitution. So this binding, this thing is a very complicated subject, because add to it, you have talked about High Court and all this, but if you look at, if I add to it the decisions of special bench of tribunals, if I add to the complications of 2-member bench versus 3-judge bench, if I talk to you about a judgment which was rendered prior and judgment rendered later, all these add more complications to it. But going by your question, I will not take up all that, because that will entail another seminar itself on its own. But sufficient to state, if you find a decision in your favor, be rest assured that there is an 80% weightage that it will be considered, because a decision in favor of the SSC is to be considered. So that's the basic thumb rule. Then, can a dissenting opinion have the gravity to be cited as some sort of a precedent? Yes, why not? See, I'll tell you, it's not a precedent, but it does have a persuasive value. Now, what happens is, say there is a dissenting judgment, it happens in tribunal, 3rd-member bench matters are referred to, 2 judges have not agreed to on some issue, and a 3rd-member bench comes in and a 3rd member decides. Now, a 3rd member is decided in, say, favor of one of the members, the accountant member, not in favor of the judicial member. So now that's become a judgment of a 3-judge bench, 3-member. So that's okay. But what the judicial member wrote, which was not agreed by the other 2 members, can have its persuasive value when you are arguing the case elsewhere. It will not be a binding precedence. Let me be very clear, because it's an overruled view. But it will definitely have a persuasive value, and it is worth reading, so that you can maybe take out some points out of it, distinguish the facts of the case, that why the 3rd member decided in that case in that way. But had the facts were different, he would have decided maybe in favor of the judicial member. So you can definitely take benefit out of it for preparation and analyze it. But definitely it is not a precedence as such. Then 8th is, what are the conditions tribunal case to prefer High Court and Supreme Court. So now see, earlier there was a law of reference and taking the concurrence of the High Court. All that has gone away long back. Now there is no nothing like conditions. Department has limitations based on monetary values, for which there are circulars which keep coming from time to time that above so much crores you don't have to file appeal, and below so much you don't have to file an appeal in the High Court and Supreme Court. But from an assessee's perspective, even if there is a 1 lakh addition and if he wants to go to High Court, nobody can stop him. The High Court may not admit the question of law, that's another issue, but there is no restrictions as such or conditions attached to it. Basically, I can look at conditions: you have to pay the fees, you have to the filing fee of the court and all that. That can be the condition, but there is no restriction in the law to prefer an appeal. That is not yet taken away for assessee. Assessee is free to file.
Those were the questions, sir. So time permits.
I believe I've finished in time, and so.
Mr. Pandra, over to you, sir.
Sir, yes, sir. So it was an excellent job from your side, sir. It was very, very useful. And if at all members have any doubts, if you don't have any reservations, we will shoot up the collect the questions and send you, if possible. You can respond them on mail.
Sure.
Because this is a altogether new topic for many who are not in the what's called appeal proceedings. Many would not use these things in the routine up to scrutiny level. So those people may get the doubts at a later stage. So that may be very helpful. And it was a great job. You have given all the aspects of the reading and also utilization and the applicability and their validity, everything. So thank you very much on behalf of SIRC for sharing your time and energy and your willingness to share knowledge also. And I thank each one of you members who have been participating continuously, and also today. I think you must have definitely been enriched with the text presentation on this topic. And thank you very much for your support. I also thank the chairman for selecting this topic in absentia. And also the SIRC office for arranging the program in a systematic way. Last but not least, our technical support, Mr. Selva. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anandal. Once again, thank you very much to you, sir. Very, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Good night.